At the heart of the trade war between China and the United States, in a time dominated by tariffs and political decisions, a shocking truth has emerged, backed by documents and images. A truth shaking the throne of luxury brands and exposing the world of artificial glamour. Made in China? Yes, but not how you think. Louis Vuitton, Birkin, and Chanel bags that sell for tens of thousands of dollars come out of the same Chinese factories, now offering them directly to you for just 1/10 the price. So what's happening behind the scenes? Why did Chinese manufacturers decide to expose the secrets? And how is this scandal connected to the US-China trade war and the rise in tariffs? This video reveals what the news doesn't. Everything started with videos that went viral on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms. Chinese suppliers were seen making luxury bags for brands like Birkin. One of them says, this bag sells in stores for $34,000, but from the factory, it's only $1,400, shipping and customs included. Same materials, same quality, sometimes even the same factories. The only difference is the brand label. This wasn't just random claims, it was a detailed presentation showing how the bags are made, including material descriptions, skilled labor, and even cost breakdowns. Suppliers didn't stop there. They openly invited American shoppers to buy directly from, well, the world's factory, as they called China. So, Guangzhou and Foshan basically became icons of this scandal, producing thousands of bags using materials worth no more than $50. These bags are then sold for, well, outrageous prices in cities like New York and Paris. According to Money Control, the suppliers use high-quality materials and skilled workers, but they sell the products without brand logos to avoid legal consequences. This whole thing honestly triggered debate over the huge profit margins that luxury brands make. But why now? Why did China suddenly decide to expose this? The answer? The trade war. After the US raised tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%, and China responded with 125%, Beijing chose a new weapon, undermining trust in the American market. Trump had called for manufacturing to return to the US. China responded by exposing facts. Social media posts mocking American workers flooded Chinese platforms, shifting the conversation from prices to dominance. Brands like Lululemon were accused of making products in China for $6 and selling them in the US for $100. So is this a global scam or just a painful reveal of economic realities hidden for years? Amid rising uproar, Chinese authorities quickly censored hashtags related to tariffs on Weibo, attempting to control the narrative. But the damage was done. What the Chinese revealed disrupted markets and exposed how brands manipulate pricing. It also showed that China holds a powerful bargaining chip in this tariff war. President Xi Jinping confirmed his country's commitment to economic sovereignty and, denounced what he called unilateral bullying. He vowed to continue internal reforms and expand global partnerships. Are we witnessing a real shift in the luxury market? Will brand monopolies collapse due to TikTok and Twitter leaks? And has China truly begun using soft economic nukes to shake America? Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you buy a luxury bag from the original factory at 1/10 the price, or does the brand still matter to you? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Business Magazine. More explosive stories are coming. In a scene as intense as a declaration of global war, global markets crumbled. Investors panicked as if sirens had gone off. The US dropped the first bomb, raising tariffs on Chinese products to unprecedented levels, a point of no return. But China's response wasn't conventional, it was a loud threat, an economic nuclear option, a silent but deadly weapon more feared than missiles. So what is this secret weapon that scared Washington? Why does the world's strongest power fear it? And how did a tariff dispute turn into an economic deathmatch between two global superpowers? In a sudden escalation, President Trump announced a 90-day freeze on the trade war. But the surprise? The freeze excluded China, America's top economic rival. Washington immediately raised tariffs on Chinese imports from 104% to 125%, then to 145%. This was, honestly, the highest jump in the history of the country's economic ties. Beijing retaliated with equivalent blows. Tariffs on U.S. goods rose to 84%, then 125%. The world's two biggest economies were now locked in a cycle of mutual escalation. America bet on wearing China down, but Beijing asserted its resilience and long-term strategy. A Chinese spokesman blamed Washington, demanding an end to its reckless actions, and warning that these moves will backfire and become textbook examples of strategic failure. So, China's Trade Committee declared that if the Chinese market can no longer absorb American imports because of, these absurd tariffs, they'll just go ahead and ignore any new sanctions. The impact on the United States is already visible. Prices are rising and honestly, consumers are paying the cost. Small and medium-sized businesses are really drowning in costs right now. Even tech giants like Apple are, well, looking for safer ground in India and Southeast Asia to avoid economic aftershocks. So, China is not bluffing, it's preparing. President Xi Jinping is leading this confrontation with patience and full readiness. China's economy is, honestly, equipped to handle sanctions and holds some really powerful countermeasures. The most powerful, rare earth elements, a key component of the economic nuclear option. If China cuts off supply to the US, it could, well, paralyze entire industries. So, what is this economic nuke that terrifies Washington? Well, there are two main tools. First, selling off US Treasury bonds, and second, banning the export of rare earth metals. China is actually one of the largest holders of US Treasury bonds, holding over $760 billion worth. But what are Treasury bonds? Simply put, they're debt instruments issued by the US government to finance its spending. Countries like China, lend money to the United States in exchange for interest. These bonds, by the way, are considered among the safest financial instruments out there. But if China suddenly sells a large portion, the impact would be massive. You'd see a sharp drop in the dollar's value, a surge in US interest rates, which means higher borrowing costs for both companies and citizens. And honestly, it could really shake America's position as the world's financial hub. That's a direct threat to the dominance of the dollar. China controls over 80% of rare earth production, which is absolutely critical for things like electronics, smartphones, electric cars, advanced weapons, and aircraft. If China stops exporting them to the United States, entire American industries could, well, just shut down. These rare earth elements include 17 chemical elements like neodymium, lanthanum, dysprosium, and erbium. Unfamiliar to many, but, they're absolutely vital to modern technology. They're essential for smartphones, computers, rechargeable batteries, and those powerful magnets inside electric motors. They're also used in military tech like smart missiles and fighter jets, and even in medical imaging like MRI machines. Why is China dominant? Well, it processes about 87% of the global supply and produces over 60% of the raw materials alone. If it halts exports, the results would be devastating. Tesla and other electric vehicle manufacturers would stop, US defense manufacturing would freeze, and green tech like wind turbines would stall. That's why these elements are called China's golden card, an unmatched pressure tool against Washington. The economic nuclear option is the deadliest in China's arsenal. But, experts like Philip Ivanov believe it's still a last resort, as it could hurt China almost as much as the United States. So it remains Beijing's final card if the conflict reaches a point of no return. Meanwhile, China is steadily reducing its reliance on the US dollar. According to CNBC, the central bank is reshaping the country's reserves to move away from American dominance. Economist Gabriel Sachs confirms Beijing is gradually divesting from dollar-based assets, aiming to break free from Washington's financial grip. China also holds other pressure tools, like halting cooperation in fighting fentanyl addiction ravaging the US, or targeting American giants like Apple and Tesla, or even US agricultural products, the lifeline of American farmers. Professor Wendong Zhang from Cornell University says, China is ready for a long fight. It has reduced its dependence on US goods since the 2018 trade war. Today, the Chinese people stand firmly behind their leadership, fully supporting the shift to domestic production and consumption.